Your position has been made redundant, effective immediately. The words were delivered with the sterile precision of a surgeon announcing a failed operation. They hung in the air of conference room 3B, smelling faintly of lemon-scented cleaner and corporate indifference. Bryce, the new chief operating officer, leaned back in his Herman Miller chair, a picture of detached authority. He couldn't have been more than 32 years old, his Brioni suit perfectly tailored, a gleaming Apple Watch on his wrist. He looked like he'd been assembled from a catalog of modern executive parts. My name is Harold Jennings. I'm 58 years old. For 28 of those years, I was the director of security systems for Omni Retail. I built the department from a key cabinet in a closet to a nationwide network of physical security protocols that protected 340 retail locations. I thought I knew where my career was heading. A quiet retirement in 7 years, a gold watch, and maybe a polite round of applause at the annual holiday party. Bryce was wrong. My position wasn't redundant. I was. As you know, Harold, he continued, steepling his fingers, we're moving toward a more agile, optimized operational paradigm. We've decided to outsource our physical security management to a third-party vendor, Securamax Global. They're the industry leader. Of course they were. The words agile, optimized, and synergy were the holy trinity of his MBA vocabulary. I'd spent nearly 3 decades ensuring that hundreds of millions of dollars in inventory stayed where it was supposed to. Bryce had spent 3 months learning buzzwords. We'll need you to turn in all company property, he said, his tone shifting from corporate speak to simple instruction, as if talking to a child. Your access badge, company phone, laptop, and any keys you have. I reached into my pocket and placed my badge on the polished mahogany table. The photo was 20 years old, showing a man with darker hair and fewer lines around his eyes. Next to it, I placed the Grand Master key, the one that could open the front door of every single Omni retail store in North America. Then came the submasters for the regional distribution centers and the key to my own office. A small pile of brass and steel representing a lifetime of work. He slid a box across the table. A standard cardboard box for terminated employees. The corporate coffin. HR will email you the details of your severance package. It's quite generous. I knew what that meant. The statutory minimum, plus a week's pay for every year of service, contingent on signing a non-disclosure agreement so airtight it would suffocate a lawyer. I stood up. I didn't say, thank you. I didn't say anything. There was a dead calm inside me, a strange clarity that settled where shock should have been. I had given this company my life, missed school plays, wedding anniversaries, birthdays. I had answered calls at 3 a.m. on Christmas morning to deal with a break-in in Omaha. And it ended here, in a sanitized conference room, at the hands of a kid who probably thought a key bidding was a type of snack. But here's what Bryce, with his Wharton degree and his talk of paradigms, didn't know. The keys I put on the table were just pieces of metal. The real key, the system, the logic, the entire hierarchical architecture of the Omni Retail Security universe wasn't on a company server. It was in 3 leather-bound, 3-ring binders stored in a fireproof Sentry safe in the basement of my house. They thought firing me would be the end of the story. They were wrong. If you like stories about quiet competence beating corporate arrogance, about how institutional knowledge is worth more than 1,000 PowerPoint presentations, hit that like button and subscribe right now. I upload new stories about corporate karma and satisfying justice every week, and you won't want to miss what's coming. I started at Omni Retail in 1996. The company was a regional player then, with just 12 stores. The founder, a tough but fair man named Arthur Abernathy, hired me himself. My background was in Army logistics, 12 years spent designing and managing supply chain systems, where a misplaced decimal point could mean a battalion went without ammunition. I understood that complexity requires meticulous control. Omni Retail's security system back then was a coffee can full of keys. Each store had its own set, managed by the store manager. When a manager quit, they'd call a local locksmith, pay him $200, and get the locks changed. It was inefficient and expensive. "Harold," Mr. Abernathy had said to me in his cluttered office, "I need a system, something that can grow with us. I want to have 100 stores one day." So I built him one. I designed a hierarchical master key system from scratch. At the top was the Grand Master, which I kept. Below that were regional master keys for each of the 5 sales territories. Below those, district masters for groups of 10 to 15 stores. Then came the individual store master, which the store manager held. And finally, individual keys for stockrooms, cash offices, and specific departments. It was more than just cutting keys. It was a complex matrix of pin tumblers and bidding codes. Each key had a unique numerical identifier. Each lock cylinder was coded to accept a specific set of keys in the hierarchy. A store master could open everything in its designated store, but not the store next door. A district master could open all stores in its district, but not in the neighboring one. It was an elegant, interlocking system of absolute control. The most important part wasn't the hardware, it was the documentation. I created what I called the Security Bible. 3 massive binders. Inside, page after page of schematics, bidding charts, key codes, and cylinder specifications for every single lock in the entire company. Every time we opened a new store, I designed its keying schedule to fit perfectly into the existing hierarchy. When a lock was changed, I updated the Bible by hand. It was my life's work. It contained the DNA of the company's physical security. By 2024, Omni Retail had 340 locations. My system had saved them, by a conservative estimate, over $5 million in locksmith fees and rekeying costs over the years. More importantly, it had prevented countless internal theft incidents and provided seamless operational security. The system just worked. It worked so well that nobody even thought about it. It was invisible infrastructure, humming along in the background. Like me. Bryce arrived 11 months ago. Mr. Abernathy had passed away in 2013, and his children, who had no interest in retail, sold the company to a private equity firm. The firm installed their own people. Bryce was their star player, a specialist in value extraction. That's a polite term for firing people and cutting costs to pretty up the balance sheet before they flip the company in a few years. From our first meeting, he was dismissive. He looked at my department's budget, a modest $92,000 a year for my salary, plus minimal operational costs, and saw fat to be trimmed. He couldn't understand why we weren't using a cloud-based digital access solution. I tried to explain that retrofitting 340 stores with electronic locks would cost upwards of $16.8 million and create a massive cybersecurity vulnerability. He just nodded, a smug little smile on his face, as if I were a dinosaur explaining the merits of swamps. His mind was already made up. I was a legacy cost. I was old infrastructure. The origin of my secret weapon, the reason the Security Bible was in my basement and not on a server, went back to a conversation I had with Mr. Abernathy in 2010. We were having a drink after work at Murphy's Diner. He was worried about the future, about what would happen to the company after he was gone. He swirled the ice in his glass. "Harold," he said, his voice low, "this system you've built, it's the company's backbone, but it's also your creation. It came out of your head, your experience. It's intellectual property." "It's the company's system, Arthur," I said. "You paid me to build it." "I paid you a salary," he corrected. "I didn't buy your brain. I've seen what happens when the money men take over. They see people like you and me as liabilities on a spreadsheet. They don't understand that the real value of a company is the knowledge in people's heads." He leaned forward. "I want you to do something for me. Keep the master documentation for yourself. The real, detailed schematics. Keep a copy at home. Don't put it on the company network. Call it your personal reference. You never know when some kid with a fancy degree who can't change a tire will decide he knows more about security than you do. So I did. I maintained the official, less detailed operational logs at the office, but the core architecture, the true Bible, stayed with me. It wasn't malicious. It was a fail-safe, a piece of advice from a wise old mentor who understood the difference between a job and a life's work. He knew that one day, Omni Retail might not deserve my loyalty. And now, that day had come. My job, my career, the security of my family, it was all on the line. I was 2 years from being able to draw Social Security, 7 from my planned retirement. My wife, Sarah, had been a teacher, but had to retire early due to health issues. My daughter's final year of college tuition was due. The severance package would last 6 months, maybe 8 if we were careful. After that, a 58-year-old security director would be looking for work in an industry that valued youth and buzzwords over experience. The stakes weren't just about pride. They were about survival. When I got home that afternoon, Sarah knew something was wrong the moment I walked in. I wasn't carrying my laptop bag. I put the cardboard box on the kitchen counter. It contained a stapler, a framed photo of my family, and a coffee mug that said, "World's Okayest Security Director." "They let you go," she said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. Her hand went to her mouth, the color draining from her face. I saw the fear in her eyes, the fear of the unknown, of bills we couldn't pay, of a future we hadn't planned for. "It's going to be okay," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Trust me." That night, I didn't sleep. I went down to the basement. The air was cool and smelled of concrete and old wood. I spun the dial on the Sentry safe, a sequence of numbers from my Army service days, and swung the heavy door open. Inside, nestled between our passports and some savings bonds, were the 3 black binders. I took them out and placed them on my workbench. I ran my hand over the embossed leather. Omni Retail Security System Architecture. Volume 1, Northeast and Atlantic Regions. Volume 2, Midwest and Southern Regions. Volume 3, West Coast Region and Distribution Centers. I opened the first one. The pages were filled with my own neat, block-letter handwriting and precise technical drawings. Page after page of hierarchical charts, keyway profiles, master pin calculations, and bidding specifications. 28 years of meticulous, painstaking work. This wasn't just data. It was a symphony of mechanical security, and I was the only one who had the sheet music. My first call the next morning was to David Chen, the lawyer Mr. Abernathy had recommended all those years ago. David was semi-retired, a sharp old shark who specialized in intellectual property and employment law. I explained the situation, the firing, the system, the documentation. He was quiet for a long moment. Then I heard him chuckle. "Arthur Abernathy," he said, "that crafty old son of a gun. He saw this coming a mile away. Harold, do you have an employment contract?" "I never signed one," I said. "I was hired with a handshake." "And your job title was Director of Security Systems?" "Yes." "Perfect," David said. "They don't have a leg to stand on. A work-for-hire claim is weak without a contract explicitly stating it. You created a proprietary system. They paid you to manage it, not to own the underlying design. Don't answer their calls. Don't reply to their emails. We wait." The first call came 3 days later. It was Bryce's executive assistant, a nervous young woman named Chloe. "Hi, Harold," she said, her voice bright and forced. "Hope you're doing well. Quick question. Bryce was wondering if you could just email over the master keying schedule. We can't seem to locate it on the shared drive." "All company property was returned to Omni Retail upon my termination," I said calmly, reciting the line David had given me. "Oh, right. But this is just a file. You must have it on a flash drive or something. It's kind of important." "I'm sorry, Chloe. I can't help you. I no longer work for the company. I hung up. The arrogance of it was stunning. They fire a man, erase his 28-year career in a 10-minute meeting, and then expect him to do them a favor 3 days later. They hadn't just underestimated my value. They had failed to even comprehend what my value was. A week later, the chaos began. It started small. A store manager in Phoenix was fired for theft and didn't return her keys. Securamax Global, the industry leader, was called in to perform a routine rekey of the store. Their technicians arrived, took one look at the proprietary lock cylinders I had specified years ago, and realized they couldn't simply repin them without the original master chart. To do so would risk creating a new key that accidentally worked in another store, or worse, disabling the district master key for that entire area. They called their head office. The head office called Bryce. Bryce, furious, called a meeting. SecureMax presented him with two options. Option A, they could replace every single lock in the Phoenix store, all 42 of them, from the front door to the bathroom stalls to the cash office safe. Cost, $8,400. Time, 3 days. Option B, they could do a complete security audit and rebuild the keying system for the entire company from scratch. Estimated cost, $4.7 million. Estimated time, 18 to 24 months. Bryce nearly had an aneurysm. He had fired me to save $92,000 a year. He was now facing a bill of $8,400 just to change the locks on one store. He chose option A, chewing out the SecuriMax representative for incompetence. Then it happened again. A store in Miami, another in Seattle. The costs were piling up, but the real emergency, the one that broke the dam, came 3 weeks after my termination. There was a major break-in at the flagship store in downtown Chicago on Michigan Avenue. It was a smash and grab, a professional crew. They got away with over $300,000 worth of high-end electronics. The entire store's security was compromised. Every lock had to be changed immediately, but they couldn't. SecuriMax arrived and gave Bryce the same terrible options. They couldn't rekey the store without compromising the entire Midwest regional hierarchy. The only solution was to replace every lock, a process that would take at least 4 days given the store's size. That meant closing their most profitable location for 4 days on a weekend. The lost revenue alone was projected to be over $500,000. The board of directors was notified. The questions began. Questions directed squarely at Bryce. His panicked calls started that Friday evening. He left 3 voicemails. The first was demanding. "Jennings, call me. This is absurd. You are legally obligated to turn over that data." The second was pleading. "Harold, look, maybe we can work something out. There's been a misunderstanding." The third was just pure desperation. "Please, Harold, just call me back. They're going to fire me." I didn't answer. I sat on my back porch, drinking a beer, and watched the sunset. The dead calm had been replaced by a quiet, hardening resolve. This wasn't about revenge. This was about the clear, cold, mathematical calculation of value. My value. The following Monday, David Chen received a call from Omni Retail's general counsel. A formal meeting was requested. The board of directors would be present. "It's time," David said to me over the phone. "Let's go to work." We walked into the Omni Retail headquarters boardroom at 10 a.m. sharp on a Wednesday. It was the same room where I'd been fired, but the atmosphere was entirely different. The air was thick with tension. The entire board was there, a collection of grim-faced men and women in their 60s. Bryce sat at the far end of the table, looking pale and diminished. He wouldn't make eye contact. The chairman of the board, a man named Henderson, who had been around since the Abernathy days, started the meeting. "Mr. Chen, Mr. Jennings, thank you for coming. We find ourselves in a difficult operational situation." Bryce cleared his throat, shuffling papers. He launched into a prepared speech, full of jargon about unforeseen legacy system dependencies and challenges in knowledge transfer. He was trying to frame the crisis as a failure of my old department, a problem he had inherited. Mr. Jennings, upon his departure, failed to turn over critical operational data, in breach of his employee obligations, he said, his voice gaining a thin veneer of confidence. David let him finish. He didn't interrupt. When Bryce was done, David calmly opened his briefcase and took out a single sheet of paper. "Mr. Henderson, members of the board," he began, his voice filling the silent room. "Let's be clear about what has happened here. For 28 years, Harold Jennings was not just an employee. He was the architect and sole custodian of a highly complex proprietary trade secret, the Omni Retail Master Key System. That system is not a document on a server. It is a body of knowledge, an intricate design that Mr. Jennings created." He paused, letting his words sink in. Mr. Jennings was never under a work-for-hire contract. Omni Retail paid him a salary to perform a job, which he did with excellence for nearly 3 decades. They did not, however, purchase the intellectual property that resided in his mind and in his personal documentation. That knowledge belongs to him. A murmur went through the room. Bryce sputtered. That's preposterous. It's for our locks, our stores. It's company property." "The locks are your property, Mr. Davis," David said, his tone icy. "The knowledge of how to make them work as a coherent system is not. You don't own the formula for Coca-Cola just because you buy a can." The power in the room shifted. It was a tangible thing, like a drop in barometric pressure before a storm. The board members weren't looking at Bryce anymore. They were looking at me. For the first time, they were seeing me not as a line item on a budget, but as the man who held the keys to their kingdom. Literally. Henderson leaned forward. "What is it you want, Harold?" he asked, his voice weary. This was my moment. My voice was steady, measured. "I'm not looking for a job," I said. "My employment with Omni Retail was terminated." David slid a proposal across the table. "Mr. Jennings is prepared to establish a new entity, Jennings Security Consulting," he announced. "This firm will license the proprietary keying system architecture to Omni Retail. In addition, the firm will provide ongoing management and maintenance services." He outlined the terms. First, an initial system restoration and documentation fee of $2 million. This was for the immediate delivery of the Security Bible and for resolving the crisis in Chicago and the other compromised locations. Second, a 10-year exclusive consulting contract for Jennings Security Consulting to manage Omni Retail's physical security. The annual fee for this contract would be $500,000. Third, Omni Retail would issue a formal, company-wide letter of apology to me for the manner of my termination. And fourth, Bryce Davis was to be terminated, effective immediately, for gross operational mismanagement. The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear the hum of the HVAC system. Bryce's face had gone from pale to a mottled, sickly gray. His hands were shaking. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Henderson looked at the proposal. He looked at me. He looked at Bryce, a flicker of contempt in his eyes. He knew they had no choice. The alternative was a complete security collapse, millions in losses, and shareholder lawsuits. They had tried to save $92,000. Their arrogance and ignorance had put a price tag of $7 million on their lesson. "All those in favor of accepting the proposal from Jennings Security Consulting," Henderson said, his voice heavy with resignation. Every hand on the board went up. Every hand except Bryce's. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Bryce was fired before we even left the building. I saw a security guard, a man I had hired 15 years earlier, waiting outside the boardroom. He nodded at me as he went inside to escort Bryce and his cardboard box out of the building for the last time. I heard later he ended up in a junior analyst role at a logistics company in Ohio, his fast-track executive career permanently derailed. Securamax Global's contract was terminated for failure to perform due diligence. They had promised a seamless transition and had instead walked their client off a cliff. Their reputation took a significant hit. My first act as CEO of Jennings Security Consulting was to fly to Chicago. I walked into the Michigan Avenue store with a new set of pre-pinned lock cylinders I'd prepared in my workshop. Working with the local locksmith I'd known for years, we had the entire store rekeyed and secured in 6 hours. The store opened the next morning on time. The crisis was over. The cost to Omni Retail for my travel and materials was $3,450, a fraction of what they had lost in sales. The $2 million fee arrived in my new business account 2 days later. Sarah and I just stared at the number on the computer screen. It was more money than we had ever seen. The first thing we did was pay off the mortgage on our house. The house where the key to my victory had been sitting in a basement safe all along. The enablers on the board, the ones who had silently endorsed Bryce's plan, were suddenly my biggest fans. They spoke in glowing terms about re-engaging with our core institutional talent and the value of experience. They were survivors, rats on a corporate ship, and they knew which way the wind was blowing now. I accepted their platitudes with a polite nod. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had their money. My life changed completely. I was no longer an employee, subject to the whims of corporate fashion. I was the owner. I set my own hours. I hired 2 sharp young technicians, veterans like myself, and began the long process of teaching them the system, of passing on the knowledge. I was building a legacy, not just punching a clock. We took my daughter out of the state school and enrolled her in the private university she'd always dreamed of, paying the tuition in full. Sarah and I booked that trip to Italy. For the first time in 3 decades, I could take a vacation without having to check my phone every hour for an emergency. The constant low-level stress that had been my companion for so long was just gone. It was replaced by a deep, quiet satisfaction. Sometimes I go down to my workshop in the basement. The 3 black binders now sit on a shelf, a testament to a lesson hard learned. They thought my value was in the hours I worked or the title on my business card. They never understood that my real value was intangible. It was the knowledge I had painstakingly built, the system I had perfected, the problems I had solved at 3 a.m. It was the wisdom that comes only from experience. They saw an old man who was a line item on a budget, a cost to be optimized. They failed to see the architect holding the blueprints. Their greatest mistake wasn't firing me. It was in not understanding what I took with me when I walked out the door. Some things are worth more than a salary. Some things can't be outsourced. Thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell to get alerts about new stories of justice and karma. Leave a comment letting me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next video.